Welcome to another devlog for Legend 64, an adventure game I'm making with a low poly art style inspired by the Nintendo 64. This is the newest area in my game, the Blighted Village, an eerie and seemingly deserted town that has fallen under the malign influence of evil spirits. The Blighted Village is a location you'll come across early in the game, and I designed it to set a serious and ominous tone for the story that will unfold. My goal was to tell a story through the environment, one that demonstrates the high stakes of the quest to the player, showcasing the dire consequences should it fail. Scattered throughout the Blighted Village, you'll find remnants of life, offering hints about its previous inhabitants. However, a question lingers. Have they all moved on, or do they lurk nearby, concealed from sight? I've sought to give the area a sense of decay in the hopes of sparking your curiosity as to the events that led to the village's desolation. I also wanted it to provide a strong visual contrast to the mysterious and otherworldly castle you'll be exploring later on. Where the realm of ghosts and spirits feels more alive and vibrant, the mortal world you're leaving behind is devoid of life and tinged in melancholy. I've drawn inspiration for the village's design from a variety of different sources. The game is set in a fantasy world, so I wanted a level of ambiguity to the village. I've tried to keep the architectural style distinct from the castle without it feeling too jarring. Allow me to give you a tour of the town's salient features. The desolate windmill, a decaying wooden carcass, leans precariously, teetering on the brink of collapse. The unofficial symbol of the Blighted Village, its once majestic blades are now shattered and twisted into unnatural angles. Aside it, there are ruined hovels that have begun to sink into the ground. From within the shadows of these worm-eaten burrows can be heard mysterious and furtive rustlings. Overlooking the squalor sits a stately mansion, once a dwelling of prominence, now as desolate and rotten as any of the other houses in the Blighted Village. The village itself is nestled on the edge of an ancient and mysterious forest. Whispers abound that those who venture into its depths never return. Rather than blocking out the village from scratch, I decided to repurpose the layout of an area I was originally going to use elsewhere. I feel like adhering to this pre-existing layout actually allowed the town to come together more organically, akin to how a real town might be built to conform to the surrounding landscape. I also find it easier sometimes to build a location when there are some constraints to work within. While building the town, my focus lies on carefully considering the skyline and numerous points of interest that I wish to direct the player's attention towards. The view of the skyline, adorned with scattered trees, has been a key element that I strove to maintain as I added more buildings. To help with the sense of scale, I used black cubes to suggest doors and windows, as it can be challenging to judge proportions of things when only using a single colour. The final door scale is standardised across the whole game, but a rough approximation was all that I needed during the blockout phase. I'm constantly aware of the spacing between buildings, and I'm always trying to be mindful about preventing excessive visual clutter. Game development is an iterative process, and things always end up being changed. An early idea for the village was to have this ominous-looking guillotine standing in the centre of town, complete with an accompanying wagon used for carting away bodies. However, it felt a little too on the nose, so it didn't quite make the cut. Being that this is an N64 game, and that the models are such low fidelity, the bulk of the visual work is actually done through texturing. Therefore, I always aim to get textured environments into the game as soon as possible. I've tried to keep the poly count of each house very low to retain that blocky N64 feel. One thing I love about old N64 games is how ambiguous the textures are. They give you just enough information for your brain to fill in the gaps and let your imagination do the legwork. I've created a dreary stone brick texture that I've used across the majority of the houses in the village. I feel like it's got just enough detail to trick your brain into believing there's a lot of bricks there. All of the houses in the village are dilapidated, and I needed the texture work to reflect this. Colour is so important when designing a location like this, and I could tell right away that the grass texture wasn't appropriate for what I had in mind. This is a place of death and decay, and the green made everything feel too lush and wholesome, so I swapped it out for a dirty brown. The area with the guillotine felt too much like a showstopper and was drawing attention away from the windmill, which I felt was already interesting enough on its own. I also didn't like how claustrophobic it felt moving between the beams. It just sucked, to be honest with you. The courthouse behind the guillotine was also looking too busy crammed in the back there, so instead I replaced the area with a well and some ruins. A well next to a windmill. Feels a little familiar somehow. Layering the village with different environmental effects greatly enhanced the general atmosphere and brought all the different elements of the village together. The cloudy sky is a simple cube set to rotate in the background. It uses a special texture I designed to blend the edges of the cube together seamlessly. The texture wraps around where the edges meet. This creates the illusion of an infinite skyline. I scaled the cube to a colossal size to give the level a sense of depth. To match the drab colour palette of the village, I've tinted the clouds a muddy brown colour. I feel it adds a lot to the overall dreary look of the place. Playing around in the editor made me realise a lot of the detail was getting lost, so I decided to squash the cube down so that you can see the tops of the clouds and appreciate the light just peeking through them. Having a sky in the scene made everything feel so much more real. Even just a little bit of movement in the background adds a lot of visual interest to the environment, but I knew I could take things even further. Adding in rain was crucial to creating a sad and somber atmosphere. I experimented with particles for this, which is definitely not how this would have been done on the N64. The rain makes the village feel really uncomfortable to where you wouldn't want to be stuck out in the open there for a long time. I increased the sheer volume of the raindrops to create a torrential downpour. And then because of this, I wanted to have these flooded potholes be affected by all of that rain. I was eager to capture rain ripples breaking up the surface of the water because I love small details like that and I feel it adds so much to the player's immersion. This too is using a particle system, which may be overkill for something like this. I really like how it looks, but if you know of a more cost-effective way of doing this, I'd love to know in the comments. Lastly, I wanted to add a sense of urgency to the village, so I created a lightning bolt material that will flash in certain places around the level. It's projected onto a flat plane that's designed to always face the camera. It will only appear on the screen for just a few moments, but its impact on the environment is huge, adding an ominous overtone to the space. I've created a system that moves the bolts around the map within a random radius from where they are initially placed. I did this so I had control over where I wanted the bolts to appear in the skyline, but so that they also never strike the same location twice. I've also alternated the visibility on some of the bolts so that there isn't too many striking at once. You can see how the bolts are moving around roughly the same location. Obviously the bolts aren't going to be visible the whole time, so I've made them fade out whenever they move. To tie it all together, I've used a material parameter collection to control the visibility of the bolts and the illumination of the sky. I've made the thunderclap affect the ground as well. Moving the slider controls the intensity of the flash. This effect isn't actually using real lighting and is baked directly into the material. I feel the occasional flash makes the environment feel more real and cohesive. And this is where I'm going to end the devlog. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I've got lots more I'll be adding to this area further down the line. If you like what you've seen, please consider supporting the project on Patreon, where I post weekly updates and behind the scenes content. I'd also like to take this moment to give a special thank you to my 64-bit patrons for supporting Legend 64. LRC Napkin, Mario Tavolieri, Tyler Hughes, Oliver Honleyken, Yaya Damboos, Mason Stooksberry, Waro Duck, Melty Metroid, Paul Mayer Gorham, Daniel H. Hernandez, Starkium, Power Hungry Fool, Flash the Reploid, Nick Grossi, Nicola Wallen, Bleak Bob, Twyla27, Robert M. Stwally IV, Baby Funky Kong, Unseeing Eyes, Void Kitten, Shinku Aura, Liam Kennedy, Santino, Eric, Kanzen Sun, Takamori, Angius, Bo Eckel, Great Mate, Gustav64, A Grumpy Fox, Joe, Joel Ackland, Yawning Bear, Ezra Brunziel, Alex McVicker, Zombotic, Finn Farrell, Cole Warcop, Gnuff, Cassidy, Austin Linguist, Sock Puppet, and I Eat Maths. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next devlog.